Hey, hello everybody. This is Elmo the Conservative. This is Brutally Honest Talk Radio. Inger is not with us tonight, but we do have a special guest. He is a comedian, and his name is Tyler Foley. And we're going to get started right now with Tyler telling us a little bit about his background.
Wow, thanks for that, Elmo. I'm a former child actor. Started in stage at 6 years old. Been doing film and television for 37 years or something like that. It's like getting up there, and always have been a comedic actor. I've kind of tended to lean towards the more funny roles. I've never really been a serious actor. You go through my IMDb page, and most of it is a lot of numbered characters of a comedic value, or at least comedic relief. Like even in some of I've done a couple of horror films, like Freddy vs. Jason, the remake of Carrie, and even in those, I was the goofball dirtbag. So I got into. I've always had a comedic flair. Now my job is helping a lot of stand-up comedians with their sets, with stage presence. So helping be a little bit more polished with their material. I don't do a lot of stand-up myself because I respect the art. and the people who do it well. It's an unbelievably hard. It's, in my opinion, of all the performance arts, from ballet to stage to singing, stand-up comedy is the hardest of all of the jobs, in my opinion. And so I don't do it because I'm a wimp, but I help other guys get really good at least their stage presence portion of it. A good friend of mine, Drew Howard, is an up-and-coming comic. He's phenomenal. Very, 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 very funny. Of course he is. He's Canadian, so that's what Canada exports, right? Maple syrup and comics. So he's really good, and me and him work on his sets a lot, and it's really quite fun.
Let me ask a question. When you say that stand-up comedy is very difficult, are you saying more just the art itself of going on one night at a time and making people laugh, or developing an act, or are you saying over time to just maintain that and keep it going as a career?
Everything.
Keeping it going.
The whole everything. First of all, it's the only, like, if you were to go to any other performance art, your expectation of how you will feel throughout the performance and leaving the performance is unknown. You have no idea what that medium is going to do to you and for the audience. The stand-up comedy is the only performance art where I go expecting one emotion. You are going to make me laugh, and if you don't make me laugh, sir, you suck. But,
right.
And they don't. There are some great comedians who are working out new material, working a joke, trying to figure it out, who may not make you laugh that night because it's part of the process. You have to find out what the timing is, where to insert the punchlines, how to set up the story. Like, there's so much that goes into creating a set, and that's the other problem. A 10-minute set could take a year to two to develop. So
to get it really polished. Yeah,
the sustainability of that. Like, you look at some of these comics who have had careers for over a decade or two or three. My goodness. Like, I look at like somebody like Martin Short, Steve Martin, like they, to be able to continue to do routines, and they don't even, it's not like they're touring every year. You look at some of the big names who do tour a lot. They're taking years or sometimes decades off. Like, it is a hard. George Carlin is about the only person I know who could sustain a career over multiple decades while continuing to put out new material. I don't know how he did it.
Yeah, every year doing a special almost every year with new material. And he's one of the best, one of the greatest.
Hands down. I mean, even Seinfeld doesn't do that.
Right.
And I look at the great comics that we pump out, like Russell Peters, probably the largest comedic export out of Canada. It certainly is the one that's done the best for himself. And we have a lot of really good stand-up comedians come out of the Frozen North. And even he did a whole bunch of Netflix specials there, but I think when's the last time you heard anything from Russell? It's got to be a 2 or 3 year pause.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 years at least.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know it's tough. My brother was a stand-up comedian, and I used to go with him to the clubs. This was like in the Detroit area, and work in Canada and those clubs. And it's a hard grind, and saw so many great comedians that killed. Must seen
Mhm.
at least 50 that were hilarious that never made it on television.
No.
And this is going back to the early 90s. There's more mediums today, but still it's that's what their career is going to be, mostly is doing clubs and not getting on TV and not getting a special. So yeah, it's a hard discipline craft. I have a lot of respect for it. Now, you said you got started when you were a child actor. Like, around what age, when you did your
Six.
first?
6 years
Okay.
old was the first time I was on stage, and I was hooked. There was no going back from that point, man. First time I got a taste of applause, that
Yeah.
stuff is that's an addiction that's faster than crack cocaine, my friend. Like, you cannot, there's just no coming back from it. Like, I seek that high on a daily basis, hourly, in fact.
Yeah, it's a really strange thing. I've done acting and I've been on stage. I did comedy one time, and I was like the comic relief of this skit. And when I made people laugh, it's like their energy went right through me. Like,
Yeah.
I could feel it directed at me, and it's a high, it's a different high than just doing well, or any of the other emotions. That energy, right there, being in the middle of it, really something.
I think it's the purest form of joy, right? You make somebody
Yeah,
laugh, and it sparks. Like, at that, once you make somebody laugh, you've completely and totally disconnected their biases, right?
yeah,
At some, you have honed into something primal, and it flips. And when you make everybody laugh, oh, that just, as you said, there's an energy that it's undescribable if you've never experienced it. If you have experienced it, you know that there's no way to describe it, but you know exactly what I'm talking about, and there's no
hmm,
coming down from it. And I mean, I've been in performance arts for coming up 4 decades, and it's one thing to get a standing ovation at the end of a show, right? And it feels good. There's an
hmm.
energy that waves through with that. Like, there's a power that comes with that. But it's still not, as you said, it's still not the same as when you can make an entire auditorium laugh and
Yeah.
feel that and be a part of that. It's just incredible.
And it's a great thing. It's bringing people together. Whatever's going on in the world or in the news. I mean, I remember when 9/11 happened, and like people like took off from going to the clubs for a week or two, and then they were back, you know, and because people, we need that to laugh and have that a part of life, regardless of whatever is going on. So let me ask you, who are your top three today? Who do you think are the three, or your three favorite comedians?
Oh, ugh, you put me on a spot. I love Eliza Schlesinger. I think she's hilarious. I think she's sharp. She's witty. Um, Taylor, is it Taylor Thompson? I think is her name. She's up and coming as well, and I think
Hmm.
she's got just a similar biting wit. And then I mean, I love Russell Peters. I
Yeah.
love him. I love how he has the ability, um, being an Indian Canadian,
Hmm.
to expose some of the hypocrisy in racism in a really, really clever way. And in a way that somebody with my complexion could not get away with. But
Hmm.
we're all thinking, it's in the back, right? It's there. He has this ability to transcend cultures, races, age, and all the isms. He manages to just kind of, the way he delivers is second to none, and he would be living right now.
Right.
Those would be my favorite. And then if I could go back and just study with one person ever, it would be George
Man,
Carlin. Like,
looking at stand-up comedy today, and comparing to 10 years ago, before I say what I think or my opinion, what do you think is the biggest difference between doing stand up in 2010?
I think it's an interesting time right now with cancel culture, with like I humor evolves, and comedy is a reflection of its age and the time in which it was said. And it's interesting to go back and look at it from a lens, right? Like hindsight is always 2020, but I find it amazing that somebody like Kevin Hart can lose his Oscar hosting gig, something that he had worked towards for years and in many respects was going to be a groundbreaking appearance, because of jokes. And they're jokes. They're jokes that
Yeah.
he made a decade prior. That to me, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be a stand-up comedian right now in an age of cell phones and social media. You know,
Yeah. It
like
is
even
an art form. I don't think that people should take it seriously if they're going to a comedy club or sitting in front of a comedian. And one of the questions I was gonna ask was, this is before you said you don't really do stand up now, but just after what happened with Chris Rock at the Oscars and with Dave Chappelle a month later, or less than a month later, I'm wondering if comedians are or were kind of worried about that, just in going on stage. There should be some kind of security or bouncers, somebody looking out for that, because you got enough to think about with your act and what it is you want to say. You shouldn't have to be worried about, a perfect stranger that gets offended is something you say is gonna rush the stage or want to
yeah, but
want to get physical.
here's the thing. That's been a thing for decades, and it's not. It has nothing to do with social media. You make fun of a dude in the
Mhm.
audience, he may not rush the stage, but like every once in a while, you have to be like, should I walk to my car?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's been um, that is not unique unto comedy. It's an interesting job in that it's public, and that you're on real quick, and that you have the ability to really, really stir emotions, positive or
Mhm.
negative. And there are people in society who do not understand societal norms and will take things
Right.
too far, no matter where you are, who you are, what you are. You could be an Oscar-winning actor at and take things
Yeah.
too far. And we
Right.
never know what the triggers are. Like that's the thing. So I I don't know that it needs more security or less security or security at all. What I think it needs is, if you are going to, there's, regardless of what country you're in, almost all have some form of freedom of speech. There's very few countries in the world that limit your ability to say the thing that's on your mind. The
Mhm.
problem with that is there's a responsibility for what's coming out of your mouth, and there's a responsibility for the person who is listening to the things that are coming out of your mouth. Yeah, I think of, Salt and Pepper, great rap band, right? Because I'm a kid of
Mhm.
the 90s. And when they released Let's Talk About Sex, what's one of the lines in it right there? If you don't
Yeah.
like what we're saying, you have a choice. Pick up the needle,
Right.
press pause, or turn the radio off. Will that stop
Mhm.
us? No. And why should it? Right? If you don't like what I have to say, you don't have
Right.
to listen. And I think
Yeah.
that's the big problem with society right now, is we're not being responsible with the things that we're going to say in some cases. I think there are comedians who are not funny, who are saying things just to get a stir.
Mhm.
That's wrong on their part. And you have people who are way too easily offended by what has always been an art form that has been on the fringe and the edge anyways, right? That we have always used comedy as a litmus test or a thermometer or a pulse of our society. It's always been the thing that's kind of um, been subvertive. Like it's always been subvertive. It's always
Mhm.
there to question and examine what is happening in our world from a different lens. And if you
Right.
don't like what's being said, don't listen. Don't subscribe. I don't think it needs to be banned just because you don't agree with it.
Yeah, I don't want to see anything banned, not just in comedy, but in any kind of censorship or banning music, lyrics. I think it's a good thing with the labels that are, the parental guidance,
Oh yeah.
or just warning about the content, and then let it do what it does. Let people have the freedom to do what they want to do, listen to what they want to listen to.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why that's a part of the Constitution and one of the top amendments that we have, so that people really can exchange ideas and they're not persecuted for the ideas that they have. But for people to take stuff seriously or take up offense for someone else, and it's a different platform. Somebody is on stage, they're trying to get laughs, they're roasting people, working a crowd. That's not the same as if we're in a parking lot and they're saying something to me. It's a different world. They're not doing an act.
Entirely that, and I think that's the key right there. Is what people need to understand is it's performance.
Hmm.
It's performance. It's a show. You go to a comedy show. You don't go to a
Right,
comedy reality. You know?
right.
And a lot of times what is being expressed is an opinion, it's a thought, and it isn't always necessarily a good one. I mean, Lord knows, you ask your typical comic how much time they spend eating Doritos and watching cartoons, and I bet you it's
Mm,
exponentially higher than your average American.
absolutely.
Uh, and but here's the thing: what I know, I don't know many stupid comics. I mean, one of the things that I've found to be universally true, if you have somebody who has even an ounce of comedic ability, that person has a higher than average IQ
Yeah,
because
because it's genius and talent for them to
it
for them to
takes
do what they do.
it takes an unbelievably sharp mind to be able to connect things in a way that is humorous.
Right.
And not only that, but to have the ability to observe these things to even connect them to begin with. Like they're highly, highly, highly brilliant minds, and I think that's why I love working with comics, because they're the easiest. And on top of it, it's got to be, like I said, the most brutal art form around, because there's no wonder so many comedians are insecure, because
Mm.
workshopping your work, most of the time you're hearing crickets. You're like, I would have an existential crisis. Am I really funny? am i
Sure.
am I funny? Like, I have the ability for me to know that I'm funny, but it's because I'm not judged to the same level that other people are, and I wouldn't subject myself to it anymore. I've done
Yeah.
like I said, I did stand up for a while, and it was an exercise to prove that I could.
Hmm.
And once I did, I was like, well, that was my perfect 8-minute set. Good night. Like,
Hmm.
I'm off with this red light, and that is it. I am done. And who I really like too is Mike Birbiglia. I think he's amazing, but he does one man shows as opposed to comedy specials. And a
Hmm.
lot of his things are listed as specials, but they're very theatrical, and it's very apparent that he is a comedic writer and
Okay.
performer as opposed to a stand-up comedian. You know what I mean? Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't come out and do a 10-minute set. He's telling a 60-minute story arc that is very
Hmm.
humorous to watch. But I love watching his specials. It just from a pure academic standpoint of how he builds on concepts, how he gives drop loops, how he's embedding the jokes in, how they all build to a crescendo like that. His isn't traditional stand up, but man, is he funny.
Yeah, you got different levels. Like the
Yeah.
the person who, yeah, would just some guys do one-liners, and some they do stand-up comedy, and to make something and act. Yes, like different levels of talent that goes into that. And for the most part, by themselves, no excuses. No one else can be blamed. and without a lot of support, is just raw talent.
Yeah.
Comedy in the purest form.
Do you know who I think when you were saying that, one of the names that popped to my mind was Bill Burr.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, like he's funny and he's unapologetic for who he is, what he says. And I think he's one of those people, if he was willing to sterilize his act, could make it bigger. And I don't think he's willing to compromise. And I got nothing but respect for that. Like he makes me laugh. There's times where I don't agree with the things that he says, but he makes me laugh when he says it.
Right, and he's free, like freedom of speech, like it frees the person speaking.
Yeah.
And you can tell, or like back in the day, Sam Kinison, if he came on late night television compared to a HBO Uncut, you could see the freedom, and he's enjoying it, and then that makes you enjoy it more because you see them totally being themselves.
Sam dying was probably one of the worst blows to comedy. Like God, he was good. Yeah.
One of the best, and I'm still finding stuff on him that I never saw before. Like I showed my son last month, he hosted Saturday Night Live, where he was a kindergarten teacher. Like I'd never seen that before.
Yeah.
And for like every stand-up comedian can't do sketch comedy and be funny,
No,
or can't be on Saturday Night Live. You
but
know,
he could.
so
God could.
yeah,
You know what? One of the thing that I think is most amazing about his career, is that he started as a Pentecostal preacher.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was he was a man who had a faith and a belief and wasn't afraid to say it too, and yet still could um, really walk that line of very biting, very observatory comedy. And like you said, on top of being funny, he could perform. Of all of the comedic losses, uh, I think his is one of the largest because I don't know where he would be today if it
Yeah.
weren't for that car accident.
Yeah, he was only like 35 years old. So, I mean, he could have gone. I mean, Carlin was in his 60s or 70s when he died. So he could have, if nothing else, he could have gone around and still been touring and coming up with guys like that. They have like a bottomless pit
Oh
in a
yeah,
well of ideas, and he could see or hear anything in the news and turn it into a bit.
yeah.
So yeah, really, really in the middle of his prime. And
I'd be
yeah.
curious to know what his thought on the world today would be. I would love Sam, if you're out there, if there is any way that you could come and tell us, because I would love to know what his observations would be in this day and age.
You're working with a few comedians, and what area are you in? What part of the country?
I'm actually up in Canada, so I'm working with
Okay.
a couple of guys here, that are doing. They're trying to get to the Just for Laughs festival. They're doing the Yuck Yucks circuit and trying to really grind it out here.
Hmm.
And it's the one thing about Canada. It's a great testing ground for comedy because I think we're a little bit more forgiving, and I think we we need the laughter to get through the warm winters. So we're always appreciative.
Boy, yeah.
But yeah, no, like I said, my buddy Drew is probably my favorite right now that I'm working with because he doesn't need help with the comedy. He doesn't
Mhm.
even really need help with the stage presence. I think I'm there to kind of be his cheerleader and be like, no, man, that was funny. You got it. They didn't get it, but you got it, man. Yeah, if anybody wants to, really work on their stagecraft and their stage presence, you can always check out my website, SeanTylerFoley.com, and Sean is spelled the proper Irish way, SeanTylerFoley. But I have my touring up there, so if anybody's interested in working with me or just kind of wants to,
Mhm.
generally inquire about anything performance related, from a guy who's been on stage for coming up 4 decades and still is young enough to have a pulse on what's going
Yeah.
on in society, then that's the way to go. But no, if I could give anybody a word of advice, it'd be go hang out at your comedy club. Go support those guys, because they're not making a lot of money and they're doing it for your benefit. And maybe I'll see you sitting there in the clubs.
Thanks everybody for checking us out. Check us on the next episode next week. You can catch us on iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. And take care. We'll catch you then.